have to have a technical principle of your device, and it has to work and all that kind of thing. It has to work in animals, on and on. So this takes time, right? And then the other part of the story is you have to have a company that's going to survive long enough for this all to happen. This is actually in the vein of many devices. I mean, they're great up to that stage, but then somehow the company can't make it, right? That's not a simple thing, and it's, in fact, it's as challenging as all the rest of it is. So, I'm just going to tell you about my company. Okay, so I founded this company, Glysense. It's across the freeway here, and my former students, a couple of them, truly fabulous, run the company, and they're very, very effective and so on. And we've raised a lot of money, and the question is, well, how do you do this? I mean, this sensor that I just told you about is now being tested in humans. There are humans here in San Diego that have that thing implanted, okay, walking around with that in a clinical trial. The FDA has approved the trial. Remember that you have to have all your devices approved by FDA before you can use them in people. And incidentally, the application was based on an investigational device exemption. You know, the law, the 1976 Medical Devices Act says you can't use devices that are untested in people. Okay, well then how do we ever get them in people? Because we need an exception to that law. So there's a medical device, investigational device exemption to the law that allows you to use them in people even though they haven't been tested, because you're testing them, right? It's the way the law works. Okay, so you can apply for an investigational device exemption to the FDA, and if they say yeah, go. So then we did that. After doing this big pig study, the company wrote a FDA application, and the application is 3,200 pages long, incidentally. Yeah. And somebody was saying, oh, well, you just write a letter to the FDA and explain what you're going to do, they'll be happy. Yeah, but it's a big letter, you know. 3,200 pages. And, you know, they have various phases. I'm going to just cover this briefly. The phase one means you have to prove that it's safe. They don't care if it really works or not. They just want to know, is it going to kill anybody? Is it going to harm them? Or is it going to leave a scar? Is it going to somehow, you know, create harm to the patient, right? That's the only question. So you can't use very many patients on that, you know. They only let you use maybe 10 patients or 6 patients or something like that. And if you get through that trial and everything works, it doesn't work, but it doesn't cause any harm to the patient, then you go on to phase 2, which says, well, does this thing really work? Okay, now we can actually test whether it works or not. Okay, we know it's not going to hurt anybody. So anyway, so phase 1 is underway, and there are 6 patients here in San Diego who have these sensors implanted, FDA-approved trial. And now, the big problem, having said all that, here's the problem. Your company will probably have to survive for 10 years. Building the device, testing it in animals, writing the FDA application before the FDA will approve you to use it in patients at all. Well, the venture capitalists and funding agencies often just don't go for that. You can't get venture capital people to give you money and tell them 10 years from now you can get it back. It won't work. You know, they want their money back soon, and they want to have a big return on it. You know, standard 800% return is not too unusual, right? So one thing that doesn't work, in my opinion, is to go to a VC when you start your new company and say, okay, we're going to go for 10 years testing all this thing. We've got this fabulous medical thing. It might fail in the human trial, you know, but we need your money for 10 years. So that's not going to happen, okay? You're not going to find anybody that does that. Now, if you do manage to talk somebody into that, they're going to say, okay, but I want 99% of the company, or I want 98% of the company right off the bat, right? You're going to be working for 2%, whatever the income from the whole thing is at after 10 years. And I'll get 98% of it, because it's a big risk, you know, for my money for so long, right? So then you find yourself, wait a minute, I'm I'm not going to make any money at all out of this, and I'm going to do all the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that the early stage venture capital model is defective, especially in medical devices. In computers or other, car, other stuff, it's great, because the turnaround is fast, And, but in the medical device world, I believe that if you have venture capitalists who want their money back as soon as possible, and demand it back before you're actually ready to give it back, before you're at this stage, I think that can end your whole story. Everything up to that stage can be fine, but that would be the end of it. So this is another big message for you, okay? You have to get funding somehow and sustain funding, okay? So, and the investors are so savvy now that they will not invest until you have human results, okay? Yeah, so how do you get there? There's plenty of examples where they've invested in the past in medical things, and it works just great in mice or, pigs or animals or whatever. But then when you get to humans, exactly the opposite happens. It just simply doesn't work. It's not strong enough, or it doesn't have a dramatic effect, right? And so you can't go forward at that point. So investors are pretty savvy. They don't want to invest their money until you actually have some human results that says this actually does work in humans. Okay. Then the whole story is different. They get very excited at that point. They're happy to throw money at you, and it's all different. Okay. But you're going to confront the problem of, well, how do I last for 10 years approximately without any money? Okay. And pretty expensive experiments, and pretty all that stuff, right? So anyway, so the company across the street here, our strategy has been to get grants from the federal government, okay? And we did take a venture, angel venture, gave some money, a friend of the family tossed in some dough right at the start, to help you pay the rent for the first couple months, but then after that we applied for these various kinds of grants that the federal government has to stimulate this kind of whole thing, right? So SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research, is one of these kind of grants. I'm looking at this line right here. SBIR is a program that all the government agencies that sponsor research have to set aside a couple of percent of their research budget for small businesses, okay? This applies to the National Institutes of Health and Cancer, Army, EPA, whatever, right? All these agencies.
Any agency that has over $100 million in research funding is required to do this. I think it was started out at 100 million. It may be a different number now, but all 100 million is pencil dust, in the scheme of things. So virtually all the agencies that have a research budget have an SBIR program.
So this is exactly tailored for new companies. You write a proposal, the proposal is peer reviewed. That's the hard part. I mean, you've got to write carefully, and you've got to have your arguments in place, and you've got to know what you're talking about. You've got to lay out your plan. And your peers, under agreement of confidentiality and no conflict of interest, are going to read that proposal, and they're going to say, oh, this is great, or they're going to say, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, right? So then you do it again, right? Anyway, so sooner or later, and probably sooner, you can get a grant funded, and it's a grant. It's not where they're going to come up and say, give your money back someday, right? They're just saying, you may now have this money and be on your way. Okay, that's different. That's really different, right? And, well, I want to get another one soon because I'll use that money up. Okay, you better do a good job spending this. You have to make a report and explain how you were so effective in doing that, but then you can get another one, right? Different part of the project you need to work on and so on, right? And pretty soon it works like this. So this company over here has raised, well, about 13 million now from these kinds of grants. That's a big deal over a 10-year period, So they have phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 is where you don't even need preliminary results. You just have an idea, and if you have your ducks lined up and you understand how the issues about this idea. You don't even need to show that it works or anything at phase 1. At phase 2, you get to the point where you will have shown by then that it's feasible at some level, right? And then phase 2 is a much bigger grant, and it just follows from phase 1. So, that's the way to go. You can get many phase 1s and phase 2s because each one of those can address a different part. You can get one for a telemeter, right? You get one for a telemetry antenna is in its own right a difficult thing to design and so on. Well, you can get one for the biocompatibility testing of this. You can get one for this, blah, 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 right? Each one of these with their follow-ups. And then there are other awards that we've gotten over there. There used to be a program of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST, called the ATP Award. I don't think that's flying anymore. Is that true?
I think it has a different name, but it's for specific areas. I think it was more general when you got the award.
Maybe so. It used to be called the ATP, Advanced Technology Program.
Correct.
And we got like a $2 million grant from those guys, And it's the same story. It's all peer-reviewed and all that kind of thing, so it wasn't so easy to get. The Department of Defense had a program to make sensors for soldiers, and they asked exactly for a telemetry device for soldiers. And, okay, well, that's exactly what we make. There was a Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. This is really important because in every area that you're going to be making devices, there's a patient advocate group who's out there trying to raise money for research. Okay, I'm sure you know about all this, right? Every disease has got a group of very aggressive patients and parents and so on that are out there trying to figure out how to get research money into so they give money away for projects, right? So this area happens to be the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And we got some money from a program called CalTIPS. I don't know if that's still active. You know about that one? This is the state of California. And it says if you get $100,000 grant from the federal government, we'll give you $10,000 without even writing a proposal. You just fill out this form here. And that's to help you write your patents and help you do things that you can't really charge to your grants. There's some things that you don't want to put in grants. I'm going to write a patent. They don't fund that, okay? But CalTIPS will, and they want you to work in California, and they give you money if you just show that, well, I brought in a grant. No problem. Here's your bonus, right? I don't know if that program's still, the government might have got some flack on that program, but I think it's a great way of stimulating the local people. Anyway, so this company, without burden of venture capital impatience and all that, has managed to keep going and do all this basic development and research and on grants. Now, one other little minor point about this, that means the founders of the company still own the company. We haven't had to give it away to the venture capitalists, okay? So you still have control over the company. And when it's time, then you can go to the venture capitalists and say, okay, now I need venture money to do phase 2 clinical trial or something like that. And they'll say, oh, we're happy to do that because that's what we do. And, then of course you give away the company in various parts and so on in a very controlled way without this big problem of early stage venture. So this is a admonition and basically a lecture. I've known so many companies that took early stage capital and lost and died quickly, okay, for all kinds of reasons. If you can avoid doing that, now early stage capital works if the time scale is very short for your plan, okay? And it's very clear that it will work in humans, and it's very clear that doctors will recommend that their patients use it, right? But if there's any question about, well, we've got to develop more, we've got to flesh this idea out, we've got to find out more, the time course is so long, it just doesn't make sense. So I think that's the message. I think hopefully you remember, and I think it's a great way to go. I'm not saying that you have to do this. I'm saying that this fits for this kind of a project I'm talking about here. if your project doesn't have these characteristics, then there's plenty of other ways to get things. But you want to have control over the device. You don't want investment return demands to control your pace of everything, right? You want to launch the device when it's ready. You don't have somebody saying, okay, we're not ready yet, but launch it anyway. We're in a big hurry to get our money back, right? That means when you launch it, it might not work, you know, and it might not be successful. And I can show you many, many companies that have had that exact situation, right? So it's great to separate out the financial demands from the technical demands, if you can. This is an important message. So I'm going to stop today now, and I'm going to turn it over to John. And oh, now I want to give you an assignment first.
Yeah.
Give me another minute here. One big problem that I would like your help on is on the last page here. So this device is in human trials now. In another year or two, it will have finished the human trials, is our expectation. Right? And things are just going great. The problem is, and then it'll start being sold to people in America, right? We have plenty of money, or insurance programs who are going to pay for this, and it'll be a big deal. This is the whole. Okay, this is one optimal scenario. However, there's people all over the world who have diabetes, and in many countries, Mexico, China, India, Africa, just pick it, right? People have diabetes in these countries, and largely untreated. And I would like to figure out some way of getting this device accessible as soon as possible to that segment of the planet. And this is my assignment to you. I'd like you to get together and talk up the plan here and figure out how's this going to work, right? So the normal way is, okay, people just say, well, wait till we make all our money back from American sales, you know? And then we'll start trying to make a cheaper version. We'll try to make a, you know, some other kind of version that will be simpler and cheaper for people in Mexico, rural Mexico to use, right? But that's going to be way down the road, you know? And is there some way to accelerate the dissemination of any device, this is just an example, into other countries who could benefit sooner from that? So, for example, I know in Mexico, diabetes in large parts of Mexico is not treated. Okay, and I've talked to the top guy in Mexico, the top pathologist in Mexico, and he says at autopsy they have 14 times more diabetes than in America. Okay, 14 times more incidence of diabetes. Yeah, and of course they only know about it at autopsy because it basically isn't treated in rural Mexico. And of course the diet in Mexico, because of the culture and so on. I mean, I'm a big fan of that food, you know, but it does create a problem. And they're not going to be changing that so easy. Anyway, so I'm saying that this is needed in that country as an example. And so we've talked to the the Bill Gates Foundation. Maybe you've heard of this outfit, right? Their goal is pretty impressive. They would be willing, if you can get this device, if you can produce this device with no profit, they would be willing, you know, of course you have to pay for the cost of goods, you know, the basic, you have to buy the battery, but if you can make it without a profit, they'll buy a large number of these and help you disseminate them into third world countries. You know, you disseminate them, you have to have a medical system there, a doctor who knows all of what this is going to, how this is going to work. There's got to be some support system there to help the patient learn how to use it and what to do if you get that. So you can't just give it to any country and any you know, place like that. I mean, you've got to have all this put together somehow to make it meaningful. I'm asking, please suggest some ideas on how to do this because I don't have any great solutions to this, and I would welcome, and you can certainly come up with as good ones as anybody. And it's going to be relevant to whatever device you're thinking about or whatever medical solution you're cooking up in a different context. This is an assignment. So my plan was to have a little group discussion about this while we're sitting here, but maybe you can communicate by email or after John has his contribution here.
Well, it's almost noon.
Yeah, so probably the timing isn't quite right for that. So keep this in your mind. Big serious issue in mind. Okay, I'm sorry for talking so long. John, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll say a few things, but this is a great case history of nearly 40 years of effort, but it shows you the nuances that we'll go through. So thanks, David, for.
Thank you. Best of luck, everybody. Hope it saves you some headaches at some point, but you know.